You check your phone again. There's nothing new. You knew there wouldn't be. You looked 3 minutes ago, but your thumb moves anyway, scrolling through messages that have already been read, notifications that have already been cleared, screens that refresh into the same arrangement of words and images you saw moments before. The motion is automatic now, a reflex divorced from intention. You are not looking for anything in particular. You are simply looking. The silence between messages used to mean something different. It used to mean distance, geography, the slow journey of words across physical space. Now silence means nothing, or it means everything. It means someone saw your message and chose not to respond. It means you are being ignored in the real time. It means the three dots appeared and then vanished. And you will never know what was almost said. The silence is no longer neutral. It has become a language of its own, one you are constantly trying to interpret. You remember, vaguely, a different kind of waiting. Not the waiting of minutes or hours, but of days, weeks. The kind of waiting that required patience because there was no alternative. The kind of waiting that made the arrival of words feel like an event. You remember this the way you remember childhood, not clearly, not accurately, but with a texture. A feeling that things once moved at a different speed, and that speed made them mean something more. But maybe you don't actually remember this at all. Maybe you only remember being told about it. Maybe you inherited the nostalgia from someone else, the way you inherit a story about a place you've never been. The past is always clearer in retrospect than it was when it was the present. You know this. And yet, there is something about a letter that a text message cannot hold. You know this instinctively, even if you've never received a real letter. Even if every piece of correspondence in your life has been digital, you know there is a difference. You can feel the absence of something, even if you cannot name what it is. The message arrives instantly. It is convenient. It is efficient. It allows you to stay in touch with more people than any previous generation could have imagined. And yet it does not touch you the way a letter would. You are certain of this, though you cannot explain why. Perhaps it is the handwriting. The way each person's script was as distinct as their voice, as particular as their fingerprints. Well, to see someone's handwriting was to see evidence of their body. The pressure they applied to the pen. The slant of their hurry or care. The loops and crosses that no typing could replicate. When you held a letter, you held something that had been touched by the person who wrote it. Their hand had moved across this exact paper. Their breath had been in the same room as this ink. Or perhaps it is the time. The fact that writing a letter required sitting down with intention. It could not be done while walking, while waiting in line, while half watching something else. It demanded a particular kind of attention. You had to think about what you wanted to say before you said it, because crossing out and rewriting was laborious. Each word carried more weight because each word required more effort. The letter was composed, is in the original sense of that word, assembled with care, arranged with thought. Or perhaps it is the waiting itself, the fact that once the letter was sent, it entered a space beyond your control. It traveled. It moved through the physical world, carried by hands you would never see, sorted in rooms you would never enter, transported across distances that were real and measurable. And during all that time, you could not unsend it. You could not edit it. You could not check if it had been read. You had to live with what you had written and trust that it would arrive, and wait to discover what would come back. This waiting was not empty. It was full of possibility. The response was being written somewhere, in another room, another city, another country. Someone else was sitting with a pen, thinking about what to say to you. And you would not know what they thought, or how they felt, or what they decided to share until the letter arrived. The delay was not a failure of technology. It was the technology. The distance was the point. Now you can see when someone is typing. You can watch the three dots pulse in real time, a tiny heartbeat that tells you someone is thinking about you right now, in this moment. It should feel intimate. It should feel like connection. But instead, it feels like surveillance. You watch the dots and you wonder what they are writing. You wonder what they are deleting. You wonder if they will finish or if they will abandon the message and leave you with nothing but the knowledge that they almost said something. The message arrives. It is short, a few words, an emoji. It answers the question you asked, but offers nothing more. There is no texture to it, no evidence of thought. It could have been written in 3 seconds or 30 minutes, and you would never know. It exists in a perpetual present tense, stripped of the context that would give it dimension. You respond immediately because that is what is expected. And the conversation continues in this rhythm, fast and shallow, a series of small exchanges that accumulate into nothing you can hold. You are more connected than any human beings have ever been, and you have never felt so alone. This is the paradox you live inside. You can reach anyone, anywhere, instantly. You can maintain relationships across continents with less effort than it once took to maintain a friendship across town. You are part of a vast network, linked to millions of others through invisible threads of data. And yet you feel untethered, unmoored. The connections are so easy to make that they have become weightless. They do not anchor you. They do not hold you in place. You scroll through your contacts and see hundreds of names. People you went to school with. People you worked with years ago. People you met once at a party and added out of politeness. You could message any of them right now. Most would respond, and yet you do not, because you cannot think of what to say that would be worth saying. The ease of connection has not made connection easier. It has made it more difficult, because now there is no reason not to reach out, which means there is no meaning when you do. The letter required a reason. It required intention. You wrote because you had something to say, or because the relationship mattered enough to sustain through effort. The letter was a choice. And that choice was a statement. I am thinking of you. You are worth my time. I want to tell you this thing, and I want you to know it. Now everyone is worth a few seconds of your time, which means no one is worth very much at all. You think about the people who wrote letters to each other for years, decades, lovers separated by war or obligation, friends scattered by circumstance, families divided by migration. They sustained entire relationships through words on paper, through months and sometimes years of separation. How did they do it? How did they trust that the other person was still who they remembered? How did they believe in a connection they could not see or touch? Perhaps they had no choice. Perhaps the letter was all they had, and so they made it enough. Or perhaps the letter was enough because it was all they had. Perhaps scarcity gave it value. Perhaps distance gave it meaning. You try to imagine writing a letter now, sitting down with paper and pen, thinking about what you would say if you could not delete, could not edit, could not send, and then immediately regret. You would have to commit. You would have to mean it. And you realize you cannot remember the last time you wrote something you truly meant, something you were willing to let stand as a permanent record of who you were in that moment. Everything now is provisional. Every message is casual, disposable, designed to be forgotten. You communicate constantly, but you rarely say anything. You exchange information, but not presence. You stay in touch, but you do not connect. And somewhere beneath this restlessness, beneath the compulsive checking and scrolling and refreshing, and you feel a longing for something slower, something that required you to stop moving, something that asked for your full attention and gave you something solid in return. You do not want to return to the past. You know the past was not better, but you want what the past had that you do not. You want to feel located, anchored, known. The letter did this. The letter said, "You are here and I am there, and between us is a space that matters." The letter made distance visible, and in making it visible, made it crossable. The letter was proof that you existed in someone else's mind, even when you were not present. It was evidence of continuity, of persistence. Now presence is constant, and therefore meaningless. Everyone is always available, always reachable, always visible. And in that perpetual availability, you have become invisible to yourself. You do not know who you are when you are always performing, always responding, always connected. You have lost the quiet that would let you hear your own thoughts. You have lost the distance that would let you see yourself clearly. You close your eyes and try to imagine it. The weight of paper in your hands, the sight of your own name written in someone else's script. The knowledge that these words traveled to reach you, that they were written days or weeks ago, that they carry a version of someone who no longer exists in exactly this form because time has passed and people change. But here, in this letter, is who they were when they thought of you. Here is what they wanted you to know. Here is the shape of their care, made physical. You can almost feel it. The texture of the paper, the slight indentation where the pen pressed, the fold marks where it was sealed and carried. It is a small thing, a fragile thing, and yet it would be more real than anything on your screen, more solid than any message that can be deleted with a swipe. But you do not write letters. No one writes letters. That world is gone, and you are here, in this one, where everything is fast and nothing lasts, and the silence between messages is the loudest sound you know. And still, you cannot stop wondering what it would feel like to matter enough to someone that they would sit down and write. To choose words carefully, to send them across distance and time, to trust that you would wait and that the waiting would be worth it. You open your eyes. Your phone is still in your hand. There are no new messages. There never are. And yet you will check again in a few minutes because you have forgotten how to do anything else. There was a time when letters were ordinary, not romantic, not nostalgic, simply the way people communicated across distance. A practical technology no more emotionally charged than an email is to you now. People complained about the postal service. They complained about illegible handwriting. They complained about letters that arrived late or not at all. They worried about what to write and agonized over how to say difficult things. They sent letters they regretted. They received letters that hurt them. This is important to remember. The past was not better. It was simply different. And the difference is what you long for, not the reality. But within that difference was something worth examining. Not to recreate it, but to understand what it provided that you no longer have. The letter existed in physical space. It occupied the world in a way that digital communication does not. It could be held, stored, rediscovered. It accumulated in drawers and boxes, tied with ribbon or stacked in bundles. It became part of the material record of a life. When someone died, their letters remained. You could read them and hear their voice. You could trace the progression of their thoughts across months and years. You could see how they changed, what they cared about, who they loved. This created a different relationship to time. The letter was permanent in a way that made you more careful with your words. You knew that what you wrote could be reread, could be saved, could outlive you. This was both burden and gift. It meant you could not be careless. It meant your words might echo longer than you expected. Now everything is permanent and nothing is permanent. Every message is recorded, stored on servers, potentially retrievable, and yet nothing feels lasting. You delete conversations to clear space. You lose access to old accounts and their entire histories vanish. Platforms shut down and take years of correspondence with them. The permanence is technical, not emotional. The record exists, but it does not feel like it matters. The letter also moved through space in a way that grounded it in the physical world. It traveled on ships and trains. It was carried by people on horseback, on foot, in vehicles. It crossed borders and oceans. The journey was part of its meaning. When you received a letter from another country, you were aware of the distance it had traveled. You could imagine its route. You could think about all the places it passed through to reach you. This gave geography weight. The world was large, distance was real. To be far from someone meant something. You could not collapse that distance with a click. You had to acknowledge it. You had to work within its constraints. People organized their lives around the rhythm of mail delivery. They knew which days the post came. They timed their letters to arrive for birthdays or holidays. They waited by the door when they were expecting something important. The letter created structure. It gave shape to time. In rural areas, the arrival of mail was a social event. People gathered at the post office. They exchanged news. They learned what was happening in the wider world through the letters that arrived. The mail was a link to elsewhere, is a reminder that beyond the boundaries of your daily life, other things were occurring. Other people were thinking and feeling and living. For immigrants, letters were lifelines. They connected people to the countries they had left, to the families they would never see again, to the versions of themselves they had been before displacement. Letters carried news of births and deaths, harvests and hardships, weddings and wars. They travelled for weeks or months, carrying information that was already outdated by the time it arrived, and yet still precious beyond measure. A letter from home could be read and reread until the paper wore soft. It could be shared with others from the same village, the same region. It could be translated for those who could not read. It became communal property, a piece of shared heritage. The words belonged to the sender, but the letter belonged to everyone who needed it. And for those who sent letters home, writing was an act of translation. How do you explain a new world to people who have never seen it? How do you describe experiences that have no equivalent in the language you share? How do you remain connected to people whose daily reality is now so different from your own that you struggle to find common ground? The letter became a bridge across an unbridgeable gap. It could not eliminate the distance, but it could acknowledge it. It could say, I am here and you are there, and between us is an ocean, but I am still yours and you are still mine. This was not always successful. Letters could not substitute for presence. They could not solve loneliness. They could not bring people home. Many immigrants stopped writing after a while because the gap between their old life and new life had grown too wide to span with words. Many stopped receiving letters as the people they had left behind forgot them or died or simply moved on. But while the correspondence lasted, it created a sense of location. You were not floating in disconnection. You were anchored to a place and people, even if you would never return. You existed in someone's thoughts across vast distance, and they existed in yours, and the letter was proof. For soldiers, letters were survival. Not in the physical sense, though they mattered for morale and mental health, but in the sense of maintaining identity. War tried to erase who you were. It tried to turn you into a function, a unit, a number. The letter from home reminded you that you were someone specific, someone loved, someone who had a life waiting. And writing letters home was how soldiers reminded themselves of who they had been before. They wrote about ordinary things, what they ate, what the weather was like, small observations that had nothing to do with war. They wrote themselves back into existence as people, not just as bodies in conflict. The families who waited at home wrote too. They wrote about the garden, about the neighbours, about the dog. They wrote as if the person they were writing to would return and resume the life they had left. This was hope made tangible. This was refusal to accept that war changed everything. The letter insisted on continuity, even when continuity was impossible. Of course, many of these letters were lies, kind lies, necessary lies. Soldiers did not write about what they saw. Families did not write about their fear. Everyone tried to protect everyone else from the full truth. The letter became a performance of normalcy, a shared fiction that everything would be all right. But even the lies mattered. Even the performance mattered. Because it maintained the relationship. It kept the connection alive even when the connection was mostly imagination. And when the letters stopped coming, everyone knew what that meant. The silence was unbearable, and yet it was at least clear. There was no ambiguity in the absence of letters, no wondering if you were being ignored, no checking if the message had been delivered. The letters stopped because something had happened, and the not knowing was agony. And eventually, the telegram would arrive with the news you already knew in your body. This is not romantic. There is nothing beautiful about grief. But there is something to be said for clarity. For a world where presence and absence were distinct states, not a blur of partial availability. You think about love letters, the ones tied with ribbon, hidden in drawers, discovered years later. They have become symbols of romance, of a deeper kind of feeling than what exists now. And perhaps there is truth in this. Not because people felt more intensely then, but because expressing feeling required more effort. To write a love letter, you had to articulate what you felt. You had to find words for emotions that resist language. You had to commit those words to paper, knowing they could not be taken back. You had to trust that the other person would receive them kindly, or at least not mock you for trying. This required vulnerability. Real vulnerability, not the performed vulnerability of social media. You were revealing yourself to one person, in private, without an audience to validate you. And they could reject you, and you would have to live with that rejection, knowing that your words existed somewhere, evidence of your foolishness. Or they could reciprocate. They could write back with equal vulnerability. And then you would have a record of that reciprocity. Proof that someone had felt strongly enough about you to say so in words they chose carefully. The love letter was a risk. And perhaps risk is what made it meaningful. Now you can send a heart emoji. You can like a photo. You can text thinking of you without thinking at all. These gestures are not meaningless exactly, but they are not costly. They do not require you to stake anything. You can be casual about love because expressing it is casual. And perhaps this is why it so often feels hollow. But it was not only love letters that mattered, it was all letters. Letters of friendship. Letters of family obligation, letters of business, letters of complaint. Each one required you to sit down and think about the person you were addressing, to imagine them reading what you wrote, to adjust your tone and content to who they were and what your relationship was. This was a kind of attention that is rare now. You fire off messages without thinking about the recipient as a full person. You write the same generic greeting to dozens of people. You copy and paste. You communicate efficiently, but not specifically. The letter demanded specificity. Even form letters, the kind sent to multiple recipients. It had to be copied by hand or printed individually. There was effort involved. And usually, people added a personal note, a sentence or two that was just for you. Something that acknowledged the particular nature of your connection. This made you feel seen. Known, not as one person in a crowd, but as yourself. And perhaps this is what you miss most. Not the letters themselves, but the feeling of being seen by someone who took the time to look. The rhythm of correspondence created structure in people's lives. You wrote letters on Sunday afternoons. You checked the mail at the same time each day. You waited for responses with patience that was not quite patience, because you had no other option. This waiting shaped time differently. You could not fill every moment with distraction. You had to sit with anticipation, with uncertainty, with the slow unfolding of events you could not control. And in that waiting, you learned things about yourself. What you hoped for, what you feared, what you needed from others. The waiting was not empty. It was full of your own thoughts, and those thoughts had space to develop because you could not skip ahead to resolution. Now you can know immediately. You can check if someone read your message. You can see when they were last online. You can track their activity in real time. This should reduce anxiety. It should make you feel more secure. but instead it amplifies every uncertainty. You see that they read your message and did not respond, and you spiral into interpretation. You see that they are active but not talking to you, and you feel rejected. The information you have access to does not comfort you. It torments you because the information is incomplete. You can see behavior, but not motivation. You can see actions, but not thoughts. You can see someone active on their phone, but you cannot see what they are doing or why. And so, you fill in the gaps with your worst assumptions. The letter gave you less information and therefore required less interpretation. You sent it, you waited. Eventually, you received a response or you did not. There was nothing to analyze in the meantime. No digital traces to obsess over. No signals to decode. This was simpler. Not easier necessarily, but simpler. Of course, people still worried. They wondered if their letters were too long or too short, too formal or too intimate. They agonized over word choice. They rewrote entire pages. The anxiety was not invented by digital technology, but the anxiety had to exhaust itself eventually, because once the letter was sent, there was nothing more you could do. Now the anxiety never exhausts itself. You can edit your message after sending. You can unsend it. You can add more context. You can check if it was read. You can follow up. The loop never closes. The moment of commitment never arrives. And so you remain in a perpetual state of uncertainty, constantly adjusting, constantly trying to control how you are perceived, never quite satisfied that you have expressed yourself correctly. The letter forced closure. You wrote it, you sent it. It was done. Whatever happened next was beyond your control, and there was freedom in that. The freedom to stop managing, to stop performing, to let the words speak for themselves and trust that they would be enough. Perhaps they were not always enough. Perhaps they were misunderstood. Perhaps they hurt when they were meant to comfort or revealed too much or failed to say what mattered most. The letter was not a perfect technology, but it was a finite one. And finitude is something you have lost. You exist now in a state of infinite possibility. You can reach anyone, say anything, change your mind at any moment. This should feel liberating. Instead, it feels paralyzing. Because if anything is possible, then nothing is necessary. If you can always send another message, then no single message carries weight. If you can always revise, then you never commit. The letter committed you. Not forever, not irrevocably, but for the duration of its journey, your words existed in the world without your supervision. They represented you in your absence, and they had to stand alone. This required you to take yourself seriously, to believe that what you had to say was worth saying, and that you were capable of saying it. The letter was an act of faith in your own voice. Now you second-guess everything. You draft and delete. You ask others what you should say. You look for the perfect phrasing, the perfect tone, the perfect emoji to convey the precise emotional register you want. You outsource your own communication to the crowd because you no longer trust yourself to know what you mean. Or perhaps you know what you mean, but you do not trust that it will be received correctly. You have seen too many messages misinterpreted, too many casual comments blown out of proportion, too many attempts at humour read as offence. You know that without tone of voice, without facial expressions, and without context, your words can be twisted into meanings you never intended. And so you hedge, you over-explain, you add disclaimers, you soften everything until it is so gentle it has no shape at all. You communicate in a way that is designed to avoid conflict, and in avoiding conflict, you avoid connection. The letter could be misread too. People misunderstood each other across distance all the time. Relationships ended because of miscommunications that could not be resolved quickly. Hurt feelings festered for weeks before explanations could arrive. The letter was not immune to the difficulties of language, but the letter arrived whole. You read it from beginning to end. You had the full context of what the person was trying to say. You could reread it if something was unclear. You could sit with it, think about it, or consider how to respond. Now you respond immediately. You read the first sentence and start typing. You react before you have absorbed what was said. You are having multiple conversations at once, all of them fragmented, none of them complete. You skim. You misread. You respond to what you thought someone said instead of what they actually said. And the other person is doing the same thing. They are reading your words between interruptions, while doing something else, without full attention. Your carefully chosen phrasing is absorbed in a glance and dismissed, or misunderstood, or ignored entirely. The letter demanded attention. You had to set aside time to read it. You had to focus. And in that focused attention, the person who wrote it became present to you. Not physically present, but present in your thoughts. You were with them while you read their words. You were listening, even across distance. Now everyone is talking and no one is listening. You send messages into a void and hope they are received. You receive messages and skim them for information, for the practical content, without hearing the person behind them. Communication has become transactional. You are exchanging data, not presence. And you are tired. Tired of managing so many conversations. Tired of keeping track of who said what and who needs a response. Tired of the constant low-level expectation that you should be available, that you should reply quickly, that you should maintain all these connections simultaneously. The letter allowed you to focus on one person at a time. You wrote to them. You thought about them. You gave them your full attention for the duration of writing. And then you sent the letter and turned your attention elsewhere. You were not expected to maintain constant contact with dozens of people. You were expected to write when you had something to say and to respond when a response was warranted. This was sustainable. The current mode is not. You feel this in your body. The exhaustion, the way your shoulders tense when you see a notification, the way you sometimes ignore messages for days because you cannot summon the energy to engage, the way you feel guilty for this, and the guilt makes the exhaustion worse. But you cannot stop, because if you stop, you will be forgotten. If you do not respond, people will think you do not care. If you are not constantly visible, you will cease to exist in the social world. The letter required effort, but it did not require perpetual effort. You could write once a month and still maintain a relationship. You could take your time to respond and no one would think you were angry or distant. Now delays are interpreted as statements. Silence is hostility. You must be always on, always available, always ready to prove that you care. This is not connection. This is performance. And you are tired of performing. You think about the people who kept correspondence for decades, writers who exchanged letters across lifetimes, friends who wrote to each other from different countries, different continents, maintaining intimacy across distances that should have severed them, lovers who sustained relationships entirely through paper and ink, never knowing if they would meet again. How did they trust it? How did they believe that the person on the other end of the correspondence was still who they remembered? How did they maintain intimacy with someone they could not see or touch or hear? Perhaps they did not maintain it. Perhaps they created it. Perhaps the letter allowed for a kind of intimacy that physical presence could not provide. In a letter, you could be more honest than you could be face to face. You could take the time to articulate feelings that would have been too awkward to speak aloud. You could reveal vulnerabilities without having to see the immediate reaction. You could be brave on paper in ways you could not be brave in person. And the recipient could sit with that honesty, could absorb it without having to respond immediately, could think about what you said and decide how they felt about it. Just the letter created space for reflection, for considered response, for emotional processing. Some of the most intimate relationships in history existed primarily on paper. People who barely knew each other in person, but who shared everything in letters. Who became essential to each other's interior lives without ever inhabiting the same physical space for more than brief moments. This seems impossible now. How can you be intimate with someone you never see? How can you trust feelings that exist only in words? But perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the words were enough because they had to be. Perhaps the limitation created a different kind of depth. When you cannot rely on physical presence, you learn to pay attention to language. You learn to hear what is between the lines. You learn to read emotion in the choice of words, in the rhythm of sentences, in what is not said as much as what is. The letter made you a careful reader, of others and of yourself. And perhaps this is another loss. You do not read carefully anymore. You do not write carefully. You communicate in shorthand, in emoji, in references and memes that substitute for original thought. You have become fluent in a language of efficiency, but you have lost the language of depth. There are things that cannot be said in a text message, not because the platform does not allow it, but because the form resists it. A text message is designed for brevity, for quick exchange, for information transfer. It is not designed for complexity, for nuance, for the slow unfolding of thought. You could write a long text, you could send paragraphs, but it would feel wrong. It would feel like an imposition. It's like you are asking too much of someone's attention. So you break it up. You send multiple short messages. You fragment your thoughts into bite-sized pieces that can be consumed quickly. And in that fragmentation, meaning is lost. The connections between ideas are severed. The flow is interrupted. What you wanted to say as a whole becomes a series of parts that do not quite cohere. The letter was whole. It had a beginning, middle, and end. It developed an idea or feeling across pages. It asked for your sustained attention and gave you something substantial in return. This kind of communication still exists. People still write emails, long ones sometimes. But the email feels like work. It feels like a burden. You save writing emails for when you have to, not when you want to. The email has been colonized by obligation. It is where you write to request things, to explain things, to manage things. It is not where you share yourself. And so the space for unhurried, substantive, personal written communication has contracted. You communicate constantly but briefly. You maintain contact without depth. You know what people are doing, but not how they are feeling. You see their lives in images and status updates, but you do not hear their voices, their actual voices, the ones that exist in written words chosen carefully. The letter was a voice, a particular individual voice. You could hear the person who wrote it. Their personality came through in their phrasing, their jokes, their digressions, their handwriting. The letter was not generic. It could not be. It was marked by the person who created it in 100 small ways. Your messages now are interchangeable. They look like everyone else's messages. The same platform, the same font, the same emoji. Your voice is flattened into uniformity. You try to distinguish yourself through what you say, but the how of saying it is standardized. And perhaps this is why you feel so absent to yourself, because you communicate in a medium that erases the marks of your individuality. You are a username, an avatar, a profile. You are data. You are not quite real. The letter was real. It existed in the world. It could be touched, smelled, damaged, preserved. It was vulnerable to all the things that affect physical objects. It could be lost in the mail. It could be destroyed by water or fire. It could yellow with age. It could be eaten by mice or torn by rough handling. This vulnerability made it precious. You kept letters because you knew they were fragile. You protected them because they could not be replaced. The words existed in only one place, on that specific piece of paper, and if the paper was destroyed, the words were gone forever. Now everything is backed up, stored in clouds, retrievable. You never have to worry about losing a message. And because you never have to worry, you never value them. They accumulate in inboxes and folders, unread, unsorted, overwhelming. You have more words than any previous generation could have imagined, and almost none of them matter. The scarcity of letters made each one significant. You did not receive so many that you could afford to ignore them. When a letter arrived, it was an event. You opened it with attention. You read it completely. You might read it multiple times. You might save it and reread it months later. Now, you delete messages to clear space. You archive conversations you will never look at again. You have thousands of words from people you care about, and you cannot remember what any of them said. The abundance has made everything weightless. But the weight was not just in scarcity. It was in the fact that letters marked time. You could see the progression of a relationship across letters. You could watch children grow up in their mother's descriptions. You could trace the arc of someone's life through the concerns that appeared and disappeared from their correspondence. The letter was part of a sequence. It referred to previous letters. It anticipated future ones. It existed in conversation with the entire history of the relationship. Each letter was a new chapter in an ongoing story. Your messages now are disconnected. Yet you can scroll back through a conversation, but the experience is disorienting. The messages are time-stamped, but they do not feel sequential. They feel random. You jump from topic to topic without transition. You have multiple conversations happening simultaneously, all threaded together in a confusing tangle. You cannot see the shape of the relationship. You cannot feel its continuity. Everything is present tense. Everything is immediate. There is no sense of development, of growth, of change over time. The letter showed you time passing. The handwriting might change. The paper might change. The concerns might change. You could feel someone aging, maturing, struggling, finding peace. The letters were a record of transformation. Now everyone is frozen in their profile pictures. Everyone is perpetually young, perpetually happy, as perpetually the version of themselves they want you to see. There is no aging, no vulnerability, no evidence of time's effects. And perhaps this is why you feel stuck, because you are communicating in a medium that denies time, that tries to keep everything in an eternal present, that resists the natural progression of growth and change and loss. The letter accepted time. It accepted distance. It accepted that people change, and relationships evolve, and nothing stays the same. The letter said, "Here is who I am now, in this moment, and I am sending this version of myself to you across time and space, and by the time you read it, I will already be different." This was honest. This was real. This was a kind of communication that acknowledged the fundamental conditions of existence, that you are always becoming, that others are always becoming, and that connection is not static but dynamic, that love is not a fixed state, but a series of choices to reach out again and again across the distances that separate you. You wonder what it felt like to wait for a letter you knew was coming, the way anticipation built over days, the way you listened for the mail carrier, the way your heart would lift when you saw the familiar handwriting on an envelope. This was a simple pleasure, a reliable one. The world offered you this moment of joy, and you could count on it, and it cost nothing except the patience to wait. Now you have so many pleasures available instantly that none of them satisfy. You can watch anything, listen to anything, read anything, talk to anyone, at any moment. And yet you are bored, restless, hungry for something you cannot name. Perhaps what you are hungry for is anticipation itself, the feeling of wanting something and having to wait for it, the way waiting intensifies desire, the way satisfaction means more when you have had to defer it. The letter taught patience, not as a virtue you were supposed to cultivate, but as a practical necessity. You could not make the mail come faster. You could not control the timeline. You had to accept the rhythm of correspondence and work within it. This acceptance created a kind of peace. Not the peace of having everything you want, but the peace of knowing that some things take time, and that time is not the enemy. Now you are at war with time. You want everything now. You are frustrated by any delay. You refresh the page. You check again. You cannot sit still because sitting still means nothing is happening. And nothing happening feels unbearable. But in the waiting, something was happening. You were living. You were thinking. You were feeling. You were being patient. Which is to say, you were being present to the passage of time instead of trying to escape it. The letter created a relationship with time that was not adversarial. Time was the medium through which connection occurred. You sent your words into time and trusted that time would carry them to the person you loved. You waited in time, and the waiting was part of the relationship, not separate from it. Now you are trying to eliminate time, to collapse distance, to make everything simultaneous. And in doing so, you have eliminated the space in which feeling develops. Feeling needs time. It needs space. It needs distance. You cannot love someone in an instant. No matter what the songs say, love builds across encounters, across separations, across the slow accumulation of knowledge and trust. Love requires you to miss someone, to wonder about them, to imagine them in your absence. The letter facilitated this. It kept people apart while connecting them. It maintained the tension between presence and absence that gives relationship its vitality. Now you have presence without absence. You can check in with someone whenever you want. You can see what they are doing in real time. You can maintain constant contact. And in that constant contact, the longing dissipates. The wondering stops. You know too much. There is no mystery, no space for imagination. And perhaps imagination is what you have lost most of all. The letter required you to imagine the other person, to picture them reading your words, to wonder what they were thinking, what they were feeling, what their life was like in the moments you could not see. This imagination kept them alive in your mind. They were not just a static image, but a living presence you had to actively maintain through thought. Now you do not have to imagine. You can see. You can know. And in the knowing, the other person becomes smaller, less complex. They are reduced to what you can observe, which is always less than the fullness of who they are. The letter preserved mystery. It preserved the unknowability of other people. It acknowledged that you could never fully understand another person's interior life, but you could reach toward it with words, and they could reach back, and in that mutual reaching, something tender occurred. You missed tenderness, the kind that is not performed for an audience, the kind that exists in private between two people who have chosen each other, the kind that is tentative and awkward and genuine. The letter was tender because it was vulnerable, because it revealed thought and feeling without the protection of immediate feedback, because it asked to be received gently and trusted that it would be. Now, everyone is defended. Everyone is performing. Everyone is managing their image. The vulnerability that does appear is often strategic, designed to garner sympathy or attention. Real tenderness, the kind that is not trying to achieve anything, has become rare. But it existed in letters, in the small admissions, in the fears shared, in the hopes expressed, in the simple statement, "I miss you. I think of you. I hope you are well." These were not original sentiments. They were not profound. But they were true. And truth does not have to be original to matter. You have become afraid of unoriginal truths. You want your communication to be clever, interesting, worth someone's time. You edit out the simple feelings, the ordinary observations, the small truths that do not seem significant enough to share. But those small truths were the substance of letters. The daily details, the weather, the mundane events, the ordinary frustrations and joys. People wrote about what they ate, what they saw on a walk, what the neighbour said. They wrote about nothing much, and in doing so, they wrote about everything. They wrote about the texture of being alive. You have lost that texture. You communicate in headlines, in highlights, in the moments that seem worth documenting. You edit your life into content, and in doing so, you lose the life itself. The letter did not require you to be interesting. It required you to be present, to share what was actually happening, not what you wished was happening, to be honest about the ordinary nature of most days. And the recipient did not expect entertainment. They expected connection. They wanted to know how you were, what you were doing, what you were thinking. They wanted the small details because the small details added up to a picture of your life. And your life mattered to them, even in its ordinariness. This was a kind of love. Not dramatic, not romantic, but steady. The love that shows up in consistent attention, in the willingness to hear about ordinary things because they are your ordinary things. Now you are all trying to be extraordinary, to have lives worth sharing, to be people worth following. And in that striving, you have lost the simple pleasure of being known in your ordinariness. The letter said, "This is who I am in all my mundane reality, and I trust that you care enough to want to know." And the response said, "I do care. Tell me more. Tell me everything. Tell me about the weather." There were rules to letter writing, etiquette, forms of address, proper ways to open and close. These rules could be stifling. They could enforce hierarchy and formality. They could make communication feel artificial. But they also provided structure. You knew how to begin. You knew how to end. The rules gave you a framework within which to express yourself. Now, there are no rules, or the rules change constantly, or every platform has different norms, and you are never sure if you are doing it right. Do you use punctuation in texts, or does that make you seem old? Do you respond with full sentences or single words? How many exclamation points is too many? Is it rude not to use emoji, or is it unprofessional to use them? You are navigating constantly shifting expectations without guidance. And the lack of rules does not feel like freedom. It feels like anxiety. The letter writing rules were at least stable. You could learn them. You could follow them. And within them, you could still be yourself. You could still say what you needed to say. The closing of a letter was a small ritual. Yours truly, with affection, sincerely. These phrases were formulaic, but they were also meaningful. They stated the nature of the relationship. They offered a final gesture of connection before the letter ended. Now you end with nothing, a period, or no punctuation at all. The conversation just stops, or trails off, or gets interrupted by something else. There is no sense of closure, no formal acknowledgement that this exchange is complete. And perhaps this is why you feel so unfinished, because nothing ever finishes. Every conversation is open-ended. Every relationship is in a state of potential contact. You can always send another message. There is no natural ending point. The letter ended. It had to. You wrote what you wanted to say, and then you closed it, and you sent it. The act of sending was an ending. It said, "This is what I have to offer right now. I have said what I can say. Now I will wait to hear from you." This created rhythm, exchange and response, speech and silence. The letter respected the fact that communication is not constant. It is intermittent. It moves in waves, and the silence between waves is not absence of relationship. It is part of the relationship. Now you feel abandoned if someone does not respond immediately. You feel anxious if the conversation pauses. You have lost the ability to be comfortable in silence. But silence was where you lived most of your life. The people you cared about were not with you constantly. They were far away, living their own lives, and you were living yours. And occasionally you would write to each other, and in those occasional exchanges, you would create connection. But the connection did not require constant maintenance. It existed in the space between letters as much as in the letters themselves. You trusted that the other person was still there, still thinking of you, even when you could not see evidence of it. You trusted in the continuity of care. You did not need constant reassurance. Now you need constant reassurance. You need to see that someone is thinking of you. You need the likes, the reactions, the quick responses. You need proof that you matter. And the need is exhausting for you and for everyone trying to meet it. The letter did not require this. The letter said, I am writing because I want to, not because you need me to. And you will respond when you can, not because you must. And in the meantime, we will both live our lives and trust that the connection remains. This was a more sustainable model, a more human one, but it was also slower, and you have forgotten how to be slow. You have forgotten how to wait. You have forgotten how to trust in things you cannot see. The letter required faith. Faith that your words would arrive. A faith that they would be read. Faith that the relationship mattered enough to survive the gaps. Faith that the other person was who you believed them to be, even though you could not verify it. Now you can verify everything. And the verification has killed faith. You do not trust what you cannot see. You do not believe in what you cannot prove. You need evidence, and you need it constantly. But some things cannot be evidenced. Some things can only be believed. And belief is fragile. It requires care. It requires the kind of attention that cannot be given in 3-second intervals. The letter gave that attention. It asked for it, and it offered it. And in that mutual giving and receiving of attention, people created something that lasted. Not all letters were kind. Some were cruel. Some ended relationships. And some carried news that shattered the recipients. Some were never answered. Some were answered with rejection. The letter could wound as easily as it could comfort. Words on paper could cut deeply, and the cuts would be reread, reopened, unable to heal because the evidence remained. This is important to acknowledge. The letter was not inherently better. It was simply different. And in its difference, it created different kinds of pain, as well as different kinds of joy. The unanswered letter was a particular agony. You sent your words into the void and heard nothing back, and you did not know why. Were they angry? Did they not care? Did the letter get lost? Were they sick? Dead? The not knowing could last for weeks, months. You would wait and hope, and gradually lose hope. You would wonder what you did wrong. You would reread what you sent and try to find the offense. You would imagine all the reasons they might have stopped writing. And sometimes you would never know. The silence would just continue, and eventually you would accept it, and the relationship would end without explanation. This was cruel, but it was also final. You could not keep checking. You could not see them living their life without you. You could not torture yourself with evidence of their ongoing existence that simply did not include you. Now you can see exactly how someone is ignoring you. You can see them active online. You can see them responding to others. You can watch them live their life in real time while refusing to acknowledge you. And this is a new kind of cruelty, one enabled by technology, one that extends the pain instead of ending it. The letter also made certain kinds of dishonesty easier. You could construct a version of yourself on paper that did not match reality. You could lie about your circumstances, your feelings, your intentions. And the other person, far away and unable to verify, might believe you. Many relationships existed on mutual deception. People presented themselves as they wished to be seen, and the distance made the deception sustainable. When they finally met in person, the reality often disappointed. The person they had imagined did not match the person who appeared. This is not a problem unique to letters, of course. People catfish each other online. People present false versions of themselves on every platform. But the letter had a particular quality that made deception feel more intimate. The handwriting, the personal touches, and the apparent revelation of inner life all of this could be fabricated, and the fabrication felt like betrayal. So the letter was not innocent. It was not pure. It was a human technology, which means it was used for all human purposes, good and ill. But even acknowledging this, there was something in the letter that is worth mourning. Not the letter itself, but what it represented. A particular relationship to time, to distance, to other people. A willingness to exist in uncertainty. A capacity for patience. A belief that words could bridge gaps, even if imperfectly. You have lost this belief. Or perhaps it has simply evolved into something else. Perhaps you are building new forms of connection that will someday feel as meaningful as letters felt to those who wrote them. But right now, in this moment, you feel the absence. You feel the loss of something you never had, but somehow miss anyway. And that feeling is not irrational. It is not mere nostalgia. It is a recognition that something has changed in how humans relate to each other, and not all of that change has been for the better. The letter is gone, it will not return. There is no point in wishing for its return. But there is a point in understanding what it offered, and asking whether there are ways to recreate those offerings in new forms. Can you write with more care? Can you read with more attention? Can you create space for depth in a medium designed for brevity? Can you resist the pressure to respond immediately and instead take time to think? Can you trust in silence? Can you be patient with distance? These are not simple questions. The systems you are embedded in resist these practices. Everything is designed to make you move faster, respond quicker, consume more, produce more. Slowing down feels like failure. Taking time feels like losing. But perhaps losing is what you need. Perhaps you need to lose the race, to stop competing for attention, for relevance, for constant visibility, to step back from the performance and remember what it felt like to just be, to exist without documentation, to feel something without sharing it, to write something that only one other person will ever read. The letter was private. It existed in a space that belonged only to the sender and recipient. Even when people saved letters and they were later published, there was something voyeuristic about reading them. You were seeing something that was not meant for you. You were intruding on an intimacy that existed between others. And now everything is public, or semi-public, or potentially public. You write knowing that anything you say could be screenshot, shared, taken out of context. You are never truly private, and so you are never truly unguarded. The letter allowed you to be unguarded, to say things you would not say to anyone else, to reveal yourself without fear of exposure, to trust one person with your interior life. This trust is harder to come by now. You have been betrayed too many times. You have seen private conversations become public entertainment. You have learned to protect yourself, and in protecting yourself, you have made yourself unreachable. But the hunger for connection remains. The desire to be known, to be understood, to matter to someone in a way that is not transactional or performative. The letter offered this, not perfectly, not always, but often enough that people kept writing them, kept waiting for them, kept saving them, kept returning to them for comfort and evidence of love. And maybe that is enough to learn from, not to recreate the past, but to remember what was possible, to know that people managed to love each other across impossible distances, that they found ways to be present to each other even in absence, that they created meaning through simple acts of attention and care. You can do this too, not with letters perhaps, but with whatever tools you have, with whatever medium allows you to reach toward another person and say, I see you, I think of you, you matter to me. The form does not matter as much as the intention, and the intention is simple, to connect, to care, to pay attention, to offer your presence even when you are far away. This is what the letter did, and this is what you can still do, if you choose to. If you are willing to slow down, to be patient, to trust, to wait, to hope. You are lying in the dark now. The restlessness is fading. The need to check, to scroll, to engage is loosening its grip. Your phone is somewhere nearby, but you are not reaching for it. Not yet. Not now. You are thinking about handwriting, the particular loops and slants that belong to people you love, the way your mother writes your name, the way your friend crosses their T's, the small marks of individuality that machines cannot replicate. You are thinking about what it would mean to receive something written by hand. Not for a special occasion, not as a performance, just as a simple gesture. A few sentences, nothing profound. Just, I am thinking of you. I wanted you to know. How long has it been since you received something like that? How long has it been since you sent something like that? You imagine it, the paper, the envelope, the stamp, the journey it would take to reach someone, the small miracle of words traveling across space to find their intended recipient. It feels impossible, not because it is difficult, but because it is outside the current logic of how things work. It is too slow, too inefficient, too analog in a digital world. And yet, the impossibility is part of its appeal. The fact that it would require effort, intention, thought. The fact that it could not be done casually. The fact that it would mean something precisely because it is not done anymore. You think about who you would write to, what you would say, whether they would understand the gesture, whether they would think it strange or sweet or both. You imagine their surprise, the way they would turn the envelope over in their hands, the way they would open it carefully, the way they would read your words more slowly than they read anything else that day. This is a fantasy, perhaps. This imagined tenderness. This belief that a letter would be received with the care you imagine giving it. But the fantasy is not empty. It contains a truth about what you are longing for. Not the letter itself, but what the letter represents. The possibility of being seen, of being remembered, of mattering enough to someone that they would take the time to reach you in a way that requires effort. You are tired of easy connection, tired of the messages that cost nothing and therefore mean nothing, tired of the constant hum of partial contact that never deepens into real intimacy. You want something that costs, not money, but time, attention, thought. You want to be worth that cost to someone, and you want to offer that cost to someone else. This is not about letters. It never was. It is about the human need to matter, to be held in someone's mind with care, to be reached toward with intention. The letter was one way of meeting that need. There will be other ways. There already are other ways, but you have to choose them. You have to opt out of the easy defaults and into the harder, slower, more meaningful practices. You have to risk being strange, being out of step, being the person who writes too much or cares too visibly or asks for more than the culture says you should need. But the risk is worth it. Because on the other side of that risk is the possibility of real connection, the kind that sustains you, the kind that makes you feel less alone, the kind that says, you are here and I am here, and between us is a distance that matters because we choose to bridge it. Your breathing is slower now. The thoughts are drifting. The urgency that propels you through your days is fading into something softer. You are remembering things you did not know you remembered. The smell of old paper, the feel of a pen moving across a page, the satisfaction of sealing an envelope, the small ritual of affixing a stamp. These are not your memories exactly, or they are borrowed memories, things you saw in movies or read in books or heard about from people older than you. But they feel real anyway. They feel like something you miss even though you never had it. This is the paradox of nostalgia. You can long for a world you never knew. You can grieve for a loss you never experienced, because what you are grieving is not the past itself, but the possibility it represents. The idea that life could be different, that connection could be deeper, that time could move more slowly. that you could matter more. You are grieving for a version of yourself that is harder to be in this world. The version that wants to slow down, that wants to pay attention, that wants to care deeply about a few people instead of staying shallowly connected to many. That version of yourself is not gone. It is just exhausted, tired of swimming against the current, tired of resisting the defaults, tired of trying to be human in systems designed for efficiency. But the exhaustion is not permanent. It is information. It is your body and mind telling you that something needs to change, that you cannot continue at this pace, that you need to find a different way. And perhaps the way forward involves looking backward, not to recreate the past, but to learn from it, to see what was possible when people had fewer options and had to make do with what they had. They made do with letters, and the letters were enough, not because they were perfect, but because they were all there was. And in that limitation, people found depth. You have infinite options now. You can communicate in 1,000 ways. And yet, you are still lonely, still searching, still hungry for something real. Perhaps what you need is not more options. Perhaps what you need is limitation, constraint, or a boundary that forces you to slow down and go deep instead of spreading yourself thin across countless shallow connections. Perhaps you need to choose one person and write to them. Really write. Not a text, not a message, but something composed with care. Something that takes time. Something that asks to be received with attention. Perhaps you need to wait, to let distance exist, to trust that the relationship can survive gaps and silence. Perhaps you need to stop trying to be everywhere at once and just be somewhere. Fully, completely, with presence. This is frightening, because presence requires vulnerability. It requires showing up as you actually are instead of as you wish you were. It requires admitting that you need people, that you care, that you are not self-sufficient. But the alternative is this perpetual restlessness and this endless scrolling, this feeling of being connected to everyone and no one. This exhaustion that never lifts because you never stop performing. The letter said, I am willing to be vulnerable with you. I am willing to offer myself without knowing how you will respond. I am willing to wait. I am willing to trust. Can you say that now? Can you risk it? The answer does not have to be yes. Not yet. Not if you are not ready. But the question is worth sitting with. The possibility is worth considering. Because somewhere, in the space between the frantic pace of now and the imagined slowness of then, there is a way of being that might suit you better. A way that honors your need for depth, your need for meaning, your need to matter and to let others matter to you. You do not have to go back. You cannot go back. The past is gone. But you can go forward differently. You can choose practices that create the conditions for connection. You can slow down. You can pay attention. You can care visibly and without apology. You can write something that matters to someone who matters to you. And you can send it however you send it, and you can wait however long it takes, and you can trust that on the other end is a person who will receive it with care. This is not nostalgia. This is hope. Hope that the human capacity for connection is not dead, that it is only sleeping, that it can be awakened by small acts of intentional care. Hope that you are not alone in wanting more, that others are also tired, also searching, also ready for something different. Hope that the future does not have to replicate the present, that you can choose otherwise, that we all can. The room is very quiet now. Outside, the world continues at its frenetic pace. Messages are being sent, notifications are appearing, the great machinery of connection churns on. But here, in this moment, you are still. You are not reaching for your phone. You are not checking anything. You are just being. And in this stillness, you can feel it. The thing beneath the restlessness. The thing you have been avoiding by staying busy. It is simple. It is human. It is the desire to be known and to know, to touch and be touched, if not physically, then through words, to create something that lasts longer than a moment, to matter in a way that is not measured by likes or views or responses. You want someone to think of you when you are not there. You want your words to land softly in another person's mind and stay there. And you want to receive words that were meant only for you, that traveled to reach you, that asked for your attention and offered something worth attending to. This is not too much to want. It is the most basic human desire: to be in relationship, to be part of something larger than yourself, to love and be loved. The letter was just one way of doing this, one technology among many. But it worked. For a long time, it worked. And maybe some part of it can work again. Not as letters necessarily, but as a practice, a way of approaching others with care, a way of giving attention and asking for it in return. You can write longer. You can say more. You can resist the urge to be brief and instead be thorough. You can take time to find the right words instead of sending the first words that come to mind. You can read with attention. You can give people the gift of being truly heard. You can respond thoughtfully instead of quickly. You can create space in your life for the kind of communication that requires presence. That cannot be done while multitasking. That asks you to stop and be where you are, and let the other person be where they are, and in that mutual presence, to find connection. This will not fix everything. It will not solve the loneliness that comes from living in a world that is constantly changing, constantly demanding, constantly pulling you in directions you did not choose. But it might help. It might create small pockets of meaning in a landscape that often feels meaningless. It might remind you that you have agency, that you can choose how you relate to others, that you can resist the defaults and create your own practices. The letter is gone, but the need it met remains. And you are still here, still capable of meeting that need in new ways. You are still capable of caring, of trying, of reaching toward others with tenderness and hope. This is enough. This is more than enough. This is everything. Your eyes are heavy now. The day is releasing you. The thoughts are becoming softer, less defined, drifting like smoke. You are thinking about paper, but you are not thinking clearly. You are thinking about hands, about distance, about the quiet satisfaction of sending something into the world and trusting it will find its way. You are thinking about all the words that were written that no longer exist, all the letters that were lost or destroyed or simply faded beyond reading, all the evidence of care that did not survive. And you are thinking about the words that did survive. The ones bundled with ribbon and discovered in attics. The ones published in volumes. The ones that let you hear voices from centuries ago. People speaking across time saying, "I was here. I felt this. I loved these people. I was alive." You will leave words too. Not letters, perhaps. But something. Messages that might be saved. Emails that might be archived. Texts that might be screenshot and kept. And maybe that is enough. Maybe the medium does not matter as much as you think. Maybe what matters is only the attempt, the reaching out, the saying, "You are not alone, and neither am I, and here are some words to prove it." Maybe every message is a kind of letter, a piece of yourself sent across distance, a hope that someone will receive it and understand. Maybe you have been writing letters all along without realizing it, and maybe others have been writing them to you. Maybe connection is happening even now, even in this imperfect form. Maybe you just need to slow down enough to notice it, to receive it, to let it matter. The darkness is complete now. You are almost asleep. The boundary between waking and dreaming is blurring. And in this in-between space, you imagine a different world. Not the past, not the future, just a world where people pay attention, where words are chosen with care, where time moves at a human pace, You imagine writing something true and sending it to someone who will read it slowly. You imagine receiving something true and holding it gently. You imagine a conversation that unfolds over days, each response thoughtful, each word deliberate. You imagine mattering, being known, and being held in someone's thoughts with the same care you hold them in yours. This is possible. It has always been possible. It is possible now. All you have to do is try. All you have to do is reach. All you have to do is write. The silence is total now. There is no sound except your breathing. Slow, even, peaceful. You are not thinking anymore. You are simply here, present, still. Somewhere, far away, someone might be thinking of you. Someone might be composing words meant for you. Someone might be about to reach out. Or maybe not. Maybe you are alone in this moment. Maybe no one is thinking of you at all. But that is all right, because you are thinking of them. You are holding them in your mind. You are carrying them with you into sleep. And tomorrow, maybe, you will tell them. You will find the words. You will send them across whatever distance separates you. You will try. For now, it is enough to rest, to let the day end, to trust that you will wake and try again. The letters are gone. The world has changed. You have changed. But the need remains. The capacity remains. The possibility remains. And that is enough. That is enough. That is enough. Sleep now. Let the thoughts dissolve. Let the longing fade. Let the questions rest. You do not have to solve anything tonight. You do not have to fix anything. You do not have to be anything other than what you are. You are here. You are breathing. You are enough. The past is gone. The future has not arrived. There is only this moment, this breath, this quiet. And in this quiet, you can rest. You can let go. You can trust that you will find your way. The letters carried pieces of distant lives across impossible distances. They were fragile and imperfect and often lost. But sometimes they arrived. Sometimes they were read. Sometimes they changed everything. You are capable of this too, of reaching, of being reached, of mattering and letting others matter. You are capable of connection, and tomorrow maybe you will try. But tonight, you rest. Tonight, you let yourself be held by the darkness. You let yourself drift. You let yourself go. The world will still be there when you wake. The questions will still be there. The longing will still be there. But so will you. And that is all that matters. You are here. You are alive. You are enough. Sleep. Sleep.